Harun, I am currently spending money on Facebook ads. I want to grow my brand from 6 to 7 figures. I am ready to do so, but I have a really hard time actually getting a profitable results on my ads that can help me propel that growth. Can you help me? Well, that's probably the most common question that I get asked by brothers and sisters that run a Muslim-owned brand that is selling to and serving other Muslims. 99% of the founders that I'm speaking with have also tried to talk with other agency owners, consultants, freelancers, and see what they perhaps could do for them. But I often hear that many Muslim owners out there have a really bad experience with an agency, consultant, or perhaps even a freelancer when it comes to paid advertising. Now, for that reason, I have actually chosen to make this video that is going to showcase you what you need to focus on if you really want to grow from 6 to 7 figures with paid advertising here in 2025. My name is Harun Ismail, and I am a Muslim advertiser that is helping Muslim brands worldwide grow through paid advertising. Without further ado, let's get going with the video. Alright, these four levers is what you as a Muslim company owner that is selling to and serving Muslims need to focus on if you really want to grow from 6 to 7 figures with paid advertising, and more specifically Facebook ads in 2025. So without further ado, let's just get going. But before we do so, I wanted to say that the primary concept that I want to present for you today, and this concept that I'm using every single week for the Muslim brands that I'm working with, is actually age-old marketing principles from the book Breakthrough Advertising by the German copywriter Eugene Schwartz. So if you are a Muslim brand owner that is serious about reducing your cost per action, or just in general reducing your CPA, increase your volume of purchases, profit by first-time customers, meaning that whenever you acquire a new customer, actually having that customer be profitable from day one, and also grow profitably from 6 to 7 figures, I would highly recommend that you buy a copy of this book, go through it yourself, and essentially read it, because it's the fundamental principles that is used by myself as an advertiser for Muslim brands here in 2025. That is the reason for the continuous success when it comes to my results and my clientele. Now, the first principle the first lever that I wanted to essentially present is understanding your audience. And I know what you might be thinking now, Harun, I did not opt into this video to hear some basic stuff, and I truly understand where you're coming from, but I generally believe that you would be shocked if you generally know how many company owners that have a different or a wrong perception on their audience. Now, most company owners out there think to themselves that, well, I have had many customers through my different products. I have a large customer base, so I understand my audience better than they understand themselves. But what I see time and time again when I onboard a new client is that whatever that specific company is pushing front end is in their advertising isn't what our audience really needs to hear. So that's why it's so fundamental to truly understand your audience and not just do research once, but actually do it on a quarterly basis, if not monthly, to make sure that you constantly are on top of your game. Now, what you need to essentially understand when you are trying to do research about your audience is these three primary parameters that I myself look at. There is, of course, many more details that you need to have a look at, understand, and essentially digest. But to make sure that I only give you the most important and the most relevant in this video so it doesn't become too lengthy, I have three. Now, the first one is, what is my target audience mass desire? And that essentially means, what is the emotional trigger behind my audience? Why are they emotionally buying, or what's the emotion behind them purchasing my product? Let's say you are a brand selling abayas, or it could also be hijab with a specific style, a unique a unique product launch or just a unique collection that you have designed for yourself, well, a emotional trigger to let's say a consumer buying your product could be an increase in status, because when they essentially acquire that piece of clothing and their peers see them walking around with that specific style, it could give them a sense of self-esteem and thereby an increase in status. Now, if you are selling something completely different, obviously it's going to be a different mass desire. But once you understand emotionally, not just logically, which could be, as an example, I need new clothing, that's why I'm buying these abayas. But when you understand emotionally what actually moves your audience, you will also have an easier time to digest that and essentially showcase that in your marketing, which is going to have your ads convert a lot better and at a more steady level, which is also easier to essentially sustain. So it's incredibly important you find out, and what you can do to find out is use Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's something that I use myself because it's a fundamental principle about us humans. You can have a look and try to identify what your offer would essentially align with. As I said, if you sell clothing, it could be esteem, because when you buy clothing, it's not necessarily because of a safety need or a psychological need. So try to look at your offers, try to look at your SKUs, your products, and determine what actually moves your audience, what their mass desire is. That's crucial, and that's also where I see many brand owners go wrong. Now, secondly, we have to understand how aware my target audience is, and practically speaking, it's just to determine at what stage of the funnel that your customer currently are in. Now, as a rule of thumb, when you advertise your products, you will always meet and communicate to people in all 5 stages of the awareness model. So you can see that you have most aware, and that's people who are just about buying. You have people who are product aware, that's people who are evaluating your product. You have people who are solution aware, looking for different brands that can help them solve their problem. Obviously, problem aware, that's when you just identified you have a problem. And then unaware, that's people who are, as the word says, fully unaware. When you understand where your consumer or where that specific prospect is in the customer journey, it's also a lot easier for you to communicate with them, because what I see most brand owners that want to go from 6 to 7 figures do as a fatal mistake is that they try to communicate they try to push, let's say, a product aware ad in to an audience that is problem aware. And what I also see many do is that not really understanding and segmenting their entire funnel, their customer journey, and more importantly, their ads and content strategy towards people in all 5 stages of the funnel. So it's also crucial to understand that and have that in mind when essentially evaluating your audience. And thirdly, we have how sophisticated is my target audience. Now, sophistication pretty much means how skeptical is my target audience. If you look at the picture here, this is the graph that illustrates the 5 levels of market sophistication, and that essentially just showcases how, as I said, skeptical your audience is. And the way that you can evaluate how sophisticated your audience is to evaluate how often they have seen similar brands to yourself or your company and seen similar products to what you are offering. The reason why it's so crucial is because if you are dealing with an audience that is incredibly sophisticated, which means skeptical because they have seen so many similar products since the dawn of time, well, you need to adjust your advertising strategy accordingly. Vice versa, if you are in an industry that's relatively new, if you are selling a product that is relatively new, if you are one of the first people to market, well, you again have to essentially make sure that your marketing and your advertising in general also align with that, because in that case, you will need to be a lot more simple and a lot more direct, not be fancy, because otherwise your consumer and your audience will be, what's the word that I'm looking for? They wouldn't really understand your messaging. And let's say, as an example, if you are selling clothing, well, clothing, I have worked with many brands selling clothing and still do, alhamdulillah. But what I essentially always look out for when I build a strategy for a brand selling clothing is aligning my overall advertising with the fifth level of market awareness, market sophistication. Sorry, and the reason for that is because let's say that you are running a brand again selling abayas and hijabs and clothing and whatnot. Well, typically you will be in a market that is, I wouldn't say saturated, but you will be in a market with many competitors, and your consumer and the people that you are trying to pitch have seen similar offers since essentially since birth, because obviously you would need clothing since birth, right? Which thereby means that your audience is going to be a lot more skeptical, a lot more smarter, and they would have an easier time to look through any BS just to say this. It is. Therefore, you need to again shift how you advertise to that audience to make sure that you actually resonate. Because if not resonating well, that's going to give you really, really terrible results, which of course any brother or sister wouldn't like. So that's understanding your audience. Now, after that, we have to look at our offers, our SKUs, our product line, you name it. And the reason why it's so crucial is because that when you understand your audience, actually having offers, products with product market fit, and just essentially offers that resonate with your audience will help you essentially have a lot of an easier time when it comes to advertising. As I have written here, most Muslim companies that advertise, let's just say using Facebook ads to a Muslim audience, have a really hard time with their ads due to their offers not having product market fit or being suited for cold traffic. What I mean by that is that most companies out there haven't really packaged their offers in a way that actually resonate with your market. And the reason why that's so crucial is because obviously if you have something where it's resonating with your audience, it's going to be a lot easier for you to actually sell. You will have a lot of inertia of a selling proposition, and just in general your go-to-market strategy will be a lot easier to actually manage, because it's almost seamless the way that your audience buy your product, because they essentially have product market fit. It could also be that your offer isn't suited for cold traffic. And what I mean by that is, when you have an offer, when you want to sell something through your ads, you have to look at what level of the market awareness again that your offer appeal to. If you have an offer that is only appealing to people that are most aware, again, you are capping your level of skill, because it's a capped amount of people in that segment. So what you can do is try to build what I call a cold friendly offer. And if you want my framework for that, please leave a comment in the description. But what that essentially is you making a specific offer, let's just say as an example, a bundle that is more enticing to people who are less aware, aka people who are colder in the customer journey, which again will help you grow that offer and essentially sell more of that offer, which internally can help you grow from 6 to 7 figures. Now, a few examples of what you can do in order to test different offers, maybe optimize your offer for cold market is, and I have just written a few examples. There is plenty of ways to do this, but these are some of the most common ways that I see across my client portfolio, but just in general, people that is selling a product in the Muslim industry. So 3 for 2, buy 3, you only pay for 2. It could also be get a free gift. Let's say you buy this product, and that could essentially be something with a really high AUV. You can get this free gift, which would make it more enticing for the consumer to purchase. It could also be a bundle. It could also be that you have a brand where you could add in a digital product if it makes sense for your audience and obviously brand. And lastly, it could also be a welcome kit. Let's say you are selling supplements. Well, it could make sense, or just in general, if you have something that is more on a subscription basis, it could be a good idea to have some type of offer that is perceived as a welcome kit, so that when you buy this, you naturally enroll into a sort of membership with us as a company. So that's essentially a few ways to do it. Now, with that, we also briefly have to look at creative strategy, because that's also something that you can pull, a lever that you can pull in order to go from 6 to 7 figure with your Muslim owned company. And now I have made this illustration just to briefly showcase you why it's so important to dial in your creative strategy, why it's so important to make sure that you actually efficiently manage your creative output, and why it's so important that when you have your offer, that you actually test different ways of communicating that specific offer, which could be different angles or just in general different value proposition to your audience. Now, I have illustrated here a simple picture that illustrates that when you have your offer, it's crucial for you to test different ways to actually market that offer. So let's say, as an example, this example is again of a company that's selling clothing. Let's just say Abayas, as I have written here. Now, what you can essentially, or what you should do, is test different ways of selling that offer to see what resonates with your audience and what obviously doesn't resonate with your audience. So as an example, one way of communicating that offer, and these are just random examples, could be dress the way Allah loves. So we could try to have that proposition to our audience. Another angle could be, or another way of communicating could be, XX in our abaya. And what I mean by that is that you have an influencer or a content creator or just somebody with some form of presence in your industry have your clothing on, and then try to advertise it that way. So let's say Harun Ismail, he has currently, or obviously it wouldn't make sense with myself, but my sister, she is named Asma. So let's say that it could be Asma Ismail in our abaya. That could be a way to advertise your products, and that's more with the lens of social proof. Then a third way could be no more insecurity about your deen, feel more Muslim in our abayas. Let's say that I, as an advertiser, have researched that my audience have insecurity about the way they dress. Well, I could try to leverage that in the way that I advertise and connect that with our products to see if that will resonate. And it could also be an outfit of the day. So let's say you made a piece of video, a piece of content. It could be a UGC video where you have a creator make a outfit of the day video to give inspiration to your audience. Well, you could try to essentially make such video, obviously with your clothes, to see if that will resonate. But the key message here is just try different angles, because let's say you only test one or two angles. Well, you could perhaps only be one angle away from actually having a winning ad that can help you essentially grow again from 6 to 7 figures. And with that, the last thing I wanted to mention, and the last level, is ad account. And I don't really want to talk a lot about this because it's incredibly simplified nowadays, especially on Meta, but I want to showcase you what I would advise you to do when it comes to your ad account. Now, I have made an illustration here, but I also have a picture, so don't worry. I have a real client example. But what I just wanted to essentially showcase with this picture is that when it comes to advertising, especially on Meta, keep your account simplified. Don't try to have many different campaigns going at once. Try to consolidate it as much as possible. Leverage the AI algorithm, because if you leverage Meta's AI algorithm and if you give them autonomy to showcase your ads in a way that actually makes sense, well, what you do is that you value Meta's business model, which is getting their consumer to stay on platform. And when you do that, Meta will also favor you because you are an asset to their company, not a liability. And they favor you in a way where they give you better placements on the news feed. They also give you cheaper CPMs, meaning that you actually have cheaper advertising as a whole, and they make your advertising a lot easier to manage, and also essentially better results. And here is a brief graph that showcases how I would advise you to run your ad account. Trying to only have 3 campaigns. So the first one is a top of funnel campaign, the second one is also a top of funnel campaign, and the last one is a bottom of funnel campaign. Now, what I also want you to do is spend 80, not even 80, 90 to 95% of your budget on prospecting, because Facebook is a prospecting platform. It's where people are going to see your company for the first time. That's why you want to essentially leverage what Facebook do best, increase the amount of new traffic down your ecosystem, and obviously increase the amount of new customers for your company. So the first campaign here is the top of funnel campaign, where we primarily only have 2 ad sets. It can also be more if you have many products, as an example, that you want to push multiple SKUs. But as an on this example, we only have 2 ad sets. The first ad set is with the purpose of testing, and the second ad set is with the purpose of scaling. And the reason why you test and you scale underneath the same campaign is that you give Facebook autonomy. So if Facebook suddenly spends more money on your testing ad set, well, you know that you have a test that is performing better than your scaling ad set or scaling campaign, ad set. So you need to take that test, insert it into your scaling. That means that you are never going to spend money in a less efficient way, because say that you are testing and scaling in 2 different campaigns. Well, let's say you had a testing ad that was performing really well. That wouldn't necessarily take up your budget of your scaling campaign. And if that is, as I said, if that testing ad were performing better, obviously you want to spend more, and that you don't really want to spend more on scaling just because it's labeled scaling. Because if testing do better, well, we want to push that more. Hope it makes sense. The second campaign is just a campaign-based campaign. Hope that makes sense as well. But this is just a campaign that I have when, let's say, I have a drop or I have a sale, or when it's Eid or Ramadan, etc. And the reason why I have that in a separate campaign is just to know and make sure it actually gets spent. And lastly, bottom of funnel campaign. That's essentially just where we obviously have bottom of funnel messaging, where we just wanna advertise to people who are essentially just about to purchase our product. You can also have a retention campaign that also makes sense, and that will be beneficial. I would say it makes sense when you are at a larger level of scale. However, a retention campaign is also something that you can look into. And lastly, this is essentially a picture of an ad account that I have for a client of mine. Now, in all transparency, this is a Danish company, so that's also why it says Kroner. I am born and raised in Denmark, alhamdulillah, so that's why I also have a few Danish clients. But you can see that we only currently, as of right now, have 2 campaigns, and you can see I have just labeled the last year where we have spent a bit over 100 grand Danish kroner. So this is a relatively small brand, but you can see that approximately 80% of my budget went to one campaign, and then I have, say, 10% of, or a bit under 10% of my budget towards a showroom campaign, because this company is selling a high-ticket product. They have a showroom, and then obviously I have a few other campaigns, but they were primarily for catalogs or Black Month or a different type of offer that the owner wanted to test. So consolidate it and try to leverage the algorithm as much as possible. And with that said, that's actually everything that I had for this video. So I hope, dear brother or sister, that you got a ton of value from this video. And if you are looking for a paid ads partner, more specifically a partner that can help you go from 6 to 7 figure with your brand, a person that is specialized in working with Muslim companies as a Muslim myself, feel free to book yourself a time directly in my calendar through the link in the description, where I have 2 types of offers: a done for you offer where you and I work on a monthly enrollment, and I manage, create, and scale your ads for you, so you can focus on actually what makes sense, your products, your back end, your customer service, etc. Or if you're only looking for somebody that can help you build your strategy for you, perhaps even just consult you a little bit, you can also find a link for that in my description. And that's for the companies that just want a little bit help, perhaps get stirred in the right direction. That's it for now. Again, I hope that you did get a lot of value. Jazakallah khair for watching, and see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum.